of success. And it sounds like things have really picked up in momentum as you're describing the organizations, the initiatives that you folks are now undertaking and adding to this movement. I'm wondering if you can share what that looks like. Is it you folks going in to talk to businesses and companies? Is it training modules? What does that tangibly look like for the organization as you continue to try to get this message out?
Yes. So I guess one strand is definitely talking to organizations and get buy-in from their leadership. And then by giving those presentations, we leave it up to the leadership and the organization for them to decide on what initiatives they want to get involved with. Some of the organizations we got involved with was like St. Andrew's Prairie School, Bank of Hawaii, American Savings Bank, Department of Education. And so when we've talked about what is important to us in terms of leadership, INA, community, respect, trust, relationships, they've been able to come up with their own initiatives on how they can align and move forward. I think what we also are finding is that others are also who are hearing of it come to us either as individuals, nonprofits, and community organizations now that wanted to be part of this network. So, for example, we invited community leaders from Hana Maui who are leading initiatives regarding community-based cultural tourism, and they participated in our accelerator last year. They'll be participating in our accelerator group next month, and they're actually implementing some of the milestones in terms of Pono leadership, perpetuating cultural values, and then also what is good for Hawaii tourism and economy.